This season of The Witch Wave is brought to you in part by Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab. Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab is a fragrance house specializing in body and household blends with a dark, romantic, gothic tone. Over the years, they've collaborated with some of my very favorite creative visionaries, including Neil Gaiman, Jim Jarmusch, the Jim Henson Company, and most recently, Junji Ito. They continually return to inspirations drawn from witchcraft, paganism, and mythology, and they also have a sister store called Twilight Alchemy Lab, which creates oils blended and consecrated specifically for ritual use. The lab recently released their annual Halloween perfume collection, a limited edition series which includes scents inspired by folklore accounts of lycanthropy. Customer reviews of their products can be found at the fan-run bpal.org web forum, and you can check out all of their perfumes and other enchanting concoctions over at blackphoenixalchemylab.com. Would you like even more Witch Wave? Do you wish that you could hear from me and my other magical guests on a weekly basis? And what about doing monthly rituals with yours truly? Then come join me over on Patreon, where you'll get bi-weekly bonus Witch Wave Plus episodes, ad-free Witch Wave episodes, and detailed show notes for all. I also lead a monthly online magical workshop, which you can attend live or watch the recording of at your convenience. Rewards for some tiers also include magical merch and contests where you can win Witchly prizes each month, as well as early heads up about my other workshops before they sell out. And you can even sign up for the opportunity to work with me one-on-one. And all backers get access to our exclusive digital coven where you can connect to a community of other wonderful Witch Wave witches around the world. So what are you waiting for? Head on over to patreon.com/witchwave now and sign up. It's a magnificent way to get more magic in your life and to support the show. Thanks so much.
The world is filled with bewitching people, and you might be one too. Welcome to the podcast where art is magic, magic is real, and reality is stranger than dreams. I'm Pam Grossman, and this is The Witch Wave.
Hello, and welcome to The Witch Wave. On today's episode, I get to speak with one of my favorite magical makers, Ron Regé Jr., who is a cartoonist of wildly visionary drawings, comic strips, and graphic novels. His work has been described as hermetic comics. And I love the word hermetic so much because it is so multivalent in meaning. In this context, hermetic means mystical, and Ron's comics are certainly that as they pertain to the secret mysteries of the universe and magic and the cosmos and the self. But that word, hermetic, is traced to the 17th century and originally referenced alchemical or occult studies. And this is because, as we've covered on other episodes, including my conversation with alchemist Brian Cotnoir, it was believed that the father of alchemy was a figure named Hermes Trismegistus. Some say he was a real person. Others say he was a kind of imaginal hybrid deity who was a cross between Hermes, the Greek god of messages and magic, and Thoth, or Thoth, the Egyptian god of wisdom and writing, and also magic. And so, hermetic can mean alchemical or occulted knowledge. But this word also has more material applications. Since Hermes Trismegistus was considered the father of alchemy, he was credited with inventing a method of making a glass tube airtight for alchemical and straight-up chemical transmuting purposes. And so when we say that something is hermetically sealed, it means that it's airtight and sealed off from the outside world in the manner that Hermes Trismegistus originated. Now, here's where things get a little bit tricky, because I had assumed that the words hermit or hermitage were therefore somehow part of this hermetic linguistic lineage, because these words describe a person or a place who is solitary, who is sealed off hermetically, if you will, from the world, and often is engaged in deep spiritual study. However, my research tells me that hermit and Hermes actually come from different branches of the etymological tree. Nonetheless, I still feel like there's some kind of spiritual relationship between these words, if not a literally linguistic one. And I've certainly been living that connection in my own way as I've been working on my book. I keep saying that I'm in my hermit card phase because in tarot, of course, this is the card of being in solitude, to contemplate and meditate and incubate. And I see a hermit phase as a time of being receptive to messages from spirit, perhaps even from Hermes himself. Or themselves, because I see Hermes as a very fluid, mercurial kind of being. Remember that Hermes' Roman counterpart is Mercury. And so I've been in a state of self-imposed hermetic hermitude to receive and write this book, although my hermitude is admittedly rather spotty as I'm still socializing a bit and definitely leaving the house from time to time. But I've had to limit what I say yes to and limit my plans and put a lot of guardrails around my alone time so I can get this work done and make this very specific, solitary kind of magic that one needs when writing a book or working on any sort of creative project that requires deep focus. And after speaking with Ron, it's clear to me that he very much dwells in this hermetic state a lot of the time too. Making comics requires so much concentration and time and physical labor and is such solitary work anyway. And the hermetic comics that Ron makes are deeply entrenched in the occult, both in subject matter and, as you'll hear him describe, in the ways in which he receives guidance and messages from the entity or entities who show him what to make his comics about. I am so happy that Ron agreed to come out of his hermetic hermitage for a chat about his creative process, inspired influences, and alchemical inquiries. But before we get to that, first, let's check and see what's come through on the Witch Wire.
Who is it?
Witches!
Hi Pam, I'm Laetitia and I have been a fan of your podcast for some years now. I am originally from France, as you can hear, and currently living in Germany. I am so glad the witch wave has reached me where I live. I have a question for you. At the moment, I am finding myself in the situation of having to make a big decision. Have a child or leave the child-free path. I am very ambivalent about it, balancing from one desire to another, and I would like to know what magic practice might help me go through this decision process, making sure I find what is right for me, but without dwelling more than is necessary. Thank you, Pam, for all your help. I will keep on listening to and reading your beautiful work. I wish you and all listeners a wonderful spring. Bye.
Hi, Leticia. Thank you so much for your beautiful message. I am so happy that the witch wave has reached you first in France and now in Germany, and now your voice is reaching folks all over the world too. Such magic. So this question. I have so much to say about my own choice, in my case, to not become a mother, but also my own decision-making process that led me to that conclusion. So yes, I've decided not to become a mother, at least in this lifetime, as I always say. And I often hesitate to talk about it publicly because I found that people really like to weigh in on this if they have made a different choice than I have. So I just want to put this out there. I don't need to hear about it if anyone listening has made a different choice than me. Because so often when people talk about being happily childless, parents, I've noticed and experienced, feel the need to comment on how having kids was the best decision they ever made. And while they respect my choice, they're so glad they made a different choice. And I often think to myself, if you're so happy with your different choice, you really don't need to be telling me about it. I already know how amazing parenting is, and I have deep respect for those who do it. So for those listening, I really don't need to hear how happy you are as a parent. I want you to be happy, and I hope that you want other people to be happy in their decisions too. So, Leticia, for me, deciding whether or not to become a mom was also a complicated decision. And like you, I wasn't clear on it for a long while. I know that there are some people who have this deep knowing on either side of that equation. They just know they want to have a child or children, or they just know they do not. But for me, like you, I was also pretty ambivalent about it in my younger years. And I also knew and know that it is such a tender and personal topic that I really didn't care and still don't care about other people's opinions about it because, as we've established, oh boy, will they give you their opinions if they have the opportunity, right? And I also want to be clear here that you are not asking me if you should become a mom or not. And I'm glad, because no one should tell you that but you. You and you alone get to decide that. What you are asking is how you decide. So in my case, in my younger state of ambivalence, I realized that I needed to shut out all of the other pressures and opinions on all sides. And I really needed to get to the bottom of what I really wanted and needed and knew to be true about my life. And in my case, I'm very blessed in that I have a partner, my husband, Matt, who was and is supportive of whatever I wanted and whatever was best for us as a couple. And so he didn't pressure me any which way. He and I, of course, had many, many conversations about it together, but I also had a lot of therapy and did a lot of soul searching to figure out what it was I truly wanted, what I truly desired out of this life. And of course, it is possible to desire many, many things. But just to be clear, it's not as if I had no desire for a child. But when I was finally able to sort through my feelings and get quiet enough to listen to my true self and to spirit, I realized that my desire to be so many other things was so much stronger than my desire to be a parent. And so ultimately, that's the decision that I made. And let me be clear, I love children, many of them anyway. I mean, people are assholes, so little kids can be little assholes. But on the whole, I feel very connected to childhood and to my own sense of childlike wonder. And I just find it to be such a fascinating and holy time of life. And I love being an auntie or auntie figure to lots of kids in our life and in the witchy world at large. But I had to really interrogate whether or not I wanted to do the work of parenting. Now, I believe that being a parent is a sacred job. A parent is a steward of a little soul. And I believe the job of a parent is to help that soul grow and flourish and become exactly who it is meant to be. Not who the parent wants it to be, but to give that soul tools and support and care and love and guidance and not impose their own ego or their fears or their fantasies onto the child. And I also believe that children deserve parents who are all in, who are just all in on the project of being a parent once they commit to doing it. And of course, parents are whole people and are many other things too on top of being parents. And of course, there are hard days or hard times when being a parent just sucks, right? Guess what, though? There are times when just being a person sucks, parent or not. But overall, I think it's a job, a role, a calling that one needs to be fully committed to once they decide to take on that role. And so for me, once I saw up close what parenting actually entails, once more of my friends started doing it, I realized that as holy of a job as it is, I personally had other holy jobs that I was being called to do with a much louder voice. And some people are able to do lots of these jobs. They have several callings. They are here to be parents and artists and witches and I am in awe of them. And sometimes they do it all, just not all at the same time. And that's great too. Life can take many different shapes. But I know myself, and I know my limitations and my desires and needs regarding how I spend my time, what I focus on, how I stay healthy and well, and what I need in order to answer my callings. And now there's plenty more to say about all that, but I don't want to derail your question any further by only talking about myself and my journey. And let me say also that I've had other friends who weren't sure about becoming parents, but the call to do it and the excitement about it was louder than the call not to. And so they took that leap of faith and they adore the work and the joy of parenting more than they even expected. But they made that decision because for them, the call to do it was louder than the call not to. And so ambivalence is perfectly normal, and it alone doesn't mean you should or shouldn't become a parent. But it does mean that you are so correct in giving this real careful consideration. And I will say that I've witnessed some people who chose to become parents because a partner or family member or just society in general pressured them, or because they were afraid they'd regret not doing it. And so that fear is what they listened to, not the joy or excitement. They were listening to fear. And some of those people became parents, and to be honest, they now seem lost and unfulfilled and have confessed as much to me at times. They love their children, of course, but because they made the decision out of fear instead of true desire, they're now living in that reality. And that's just the harsh truth of it. But it's important for me to say one other thing on this, which is whatever you decide, know that there's going to be sacrifice involved, and that is normal. There is also so much potential gain and value in either direction. My friends who are happy to be parents, of course, have had to sacrifice time and money and sleep, but they gained incredible love and such soulful experiences and purpose that I know they wouldn't trade for anything. And my friends who have chosen not to become parents have sacrificed, of course, the extra security of having a younger generation who will hopefully, if you're lucky, grow up to support you in your older years. Now, I personally don't think that's a good enough reason on its own to have kids, but some people do. And I understand that I'm giving up the chance to someday have adult children to help and support me and my husband as we age. That's a big thing to give up, and I know that. And of course, we've sacrificed the experience of being parents, which I'm sure would have been wonderful and meaningful in many ways. But what I and our childless friends have gained is so much freedom and time and peace and resources, and in my case, the bandwidth that my particular brain and spirit need to do what I'm so loudly called to do, which is to write and teach and create and travel and explore and make meaningful, magical work without compromise. I was going to say without exhausting myself, but let's be real, I'm exhausted and spread thin as it is. I think that's just what adulthood is. And that's without having to take care of little ones on top of all that. So anyway, just know that yes, you'll be giving something up, and it's okay to feel that loss and to grieve it, and to perhaps even do a ritual around it, to say goodbye to the version of this lifetime that you are not choosing this time around. But then to make the space to be so grateful for whatever it is that you do choose, and to really appreciate it and trust that louder call. Because I don't regret the choice I've made, and 97% of the time I feel so grateful to myself and my husband and spirit that we made this choice and listened to the louder voice and let ourselves be pulled by our greater desires. Now, in terms of your decision, I understand that you'd like it to be quick and you don't want to dwell on it too long or second guess it. I don't know how old you are or how urgently you need to decide. I don't know what your resources are like or what your dreams are or what makes sense for the shape of your specific life. But I do know that taking your time with this one is absolutely okay and perhaps even necessary. I understand you don't want to torture yourself with pros and cons and dithering, and honestly, none of us knows how our lives are going to work out anyway. So much of this is out of our control, and we make the best decisions we can. But I do think that this decision is worthy of as much time as you need to make it. Big decisions often need space and quiet so that we can hear the clearest, loudest voice of our true desire. I spoke earlier about hermetic work, and I recommend you try and do some. Maybe it's journaling or meditating or going on a retreat to some quiet and beautiful place where you can hear your inner voice and the voice of spirit. I believe that our true desire is holy. It's how capital S Spirit lets us know we're living our highest purpose. So sure, yeah, you can pull a card or cards. Hell, you can flip a fucking coin. But I think a better use of your magic here is to get as quiet and still as possible, and then ask Spirit to help you hear the call of your loudest desire, to show you the way forward, and to help you know that no matter which direction you go in, it will be the right one. I hope that helps, and I'm sending you so much support and solidarity in whatever you decide, and so much love. And I celebrate whatever voice you end up hearing and whatever direction you end up choosing. Now, on to my guest. Ron Regé Jr. is a cartoonist who began drawing and self-publishing comics in the early 1990s in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Though he came out of zine culture and the underground comic scene, his work took a distinctly mystical turn thanks to a spiritual awakening he had in the early 2000s. From that point on, his comics turned cosmic, exploring ideas of the occult, esotericism, and magic, all in his signature psychedelic style. Though whimsical and whirling at first glance, Ron's work belies decades of rigorous research and devoted inquiry into the workings of the unseen world. His books include The Cartoon Utopia, Halcyon, What Parsifal Saw, The Weaver Festival Phenomenon, Skibber Be-Bye, and many more. His newest book, Shell Collection, out this week from Fantagraphics, gathers many of his monthly mini-comics, which he's been sending out to subscribers and Patreon backers, including myself, over the last 8 years. Ron's comics and drawings have also appeared in hundreds of zines and comics anthologies. And his illustration clients have included Nike, Sony, Tylenol, McSweeney's, and the New York Times. And if that wasn't enough, Ron is also the drummer for the celestial folk rock band Lavender Diamond. Ron joined me from his home in Los Angeles via Zoom. Ron Regé Jr., welcome to the Witch Wave.
Thanks for having me.
I am so thrilled to have you. Ron, you and I were just talking off mic, and I was trying to remember how your work came into my consciousness, and I truly have no idea. Like, I feel like maybe when I was born, you were implanted in my brain, because I just feel like I've loved your work for so long. So it's a true thrill to finally get to talk with you.
Thank you.
So listen, I know that somewhere around 2011, I became conscious of your work. Again, I don't know how, but I got to feature some of your original drawings in a show I curated at Observatory called Alchemically Yours.
Mm-hmm.
And then 5 years later, I had some of your work in Language of the Birds, Occult and Art, which is a big art show I got to curate for NYU.
Mm-hmm.
And so I am in the rare position of now also getting to live with some of your work, because I have procured it, my Medici-like fashion, and I feel so blessed about that. But I always like to start when I have a guest who works primarily in a visual space by trying to get the guest to describe their work, since this is an auditory medium. So,
Oh, right. That's great.
how do you describe your work to people who can't look at it in the immediate?
Right. Well, I'm a cartoonist, and so I'm kind of like attached to that sort of like medium,
Yes.
and always have been. And I make drawings. My drawings are done in a kind of thin line style. I don't use any grays. They call it in cartoon world a clear line style, which is basically like comics in the newspaper. The peanuts, just a straight line around the edge of it.
Okay.
But also, my work is psychedelic. I have a lot of lines in there. So it's kind of like I'm doing very simple cartoony line work that looks kind of wild to look at.
Yes. Beautifully done.
I just made that up. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that before. So that's good.
Well, let me elaborate on it too, because as much as it's like lots of lines, it's so intricate, and I would call it vibrational.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at a Ron Regé Jr. piece or story, it feels like it's kinetic somehow, because the lines are so dense and so whirling. There are so many details. And the other phrase that comes to my mind when I think of your work is illuminated manuscript.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Because a lot of times you're illustrating these occult texts or magical allegories, but it's in this very like underground zine culture, counterculture kind of style That's maybe what I would say.
That's where I come from, is probably why,
Yeah.
And I'm sure that if I lived in another age, I would be an illuminator.
Yes.
Somebody writing. I remember I've heard about at different points in history how, kings and so forth would hire people to go draw all the new animals and the new land they just acquired.
Yes.
All the sorts of kind of things that drawings were needed for,
Yes, yes, yes. And that would be your job, you think? You'd create a bestiary?
Yeah, or something like that. But I think in a modern context, that's kind of what I'm doing is I'm illuminating, my ideas or ideas I receive, which is kind of more how I think about it.
Yes, yes. And I know that you do have some narrative work that maybe we might classify as more straightforward or more autobiographical.
Mm-hmm.
Your work, though, came to my attention, I think, when you were working on a body of work that you call the Cartoon Utopia.
Mm-hmm.
That is maybe the first time I encountered your work. And I would love for you
Yeah.
to tell people about that project just by way of introduction.
Sure. Oh, yeah. The Cartoon Utopia. It's a book that I did. It came out in 2012 with Fantagraphics. At some point, I had a sort of spiritual awakening part of my life, or became more interested in the occult, esoteric, magical kind of things.
Mhm.
I was somebody who didn't latch onto one thing in particular. I just kind of became inflamed with a whole bunch of things at once. And I wanted to know what theosophy was. I wanted to know what all these things were. And I was reading hundreds of books. I was like, well, I have to make comics about all this stuff. And it just overwhelmed me because I was like, oh, I have to make a comic of this. Oh, I have to make a comic of this, which is kind of how cartoonists work,
Mhm.
because you do comics about any topic you want, journalism, whatever it is, autobiographical. But I was like, there's so many ideas in here that I just want to illustrate and put forward. So over the course of 5 years or so, I was just illustrating all of these different ideas and then kind of squished it all into a book.
Mhm.
And the book came out in 2012. It's not like a graphic novel. It's not like a textbook. It's kind of all these different things at once. And I feel very proud and happy that it kind of went on to have a life of its own because of what a strange, interesting book it is and how many people have used it as a gateway to look into all of these ideas, which is totally what I intended. I feel like it's such a great success. I'm past that book now. I've kind of moved on.
Of course.
It just went out of print, which I actually think is fine
I
at the
don't.
moment.
I'm incensed.
There's enough copies in the world that people can get, and if it needs to come back into print, but if I was going to edit it, I'd have to do it all over again. I have different ideas about so many of the things that I talked about. There's aspects of things that I'm not as interested in, positive mental energy, manifesting stuff. Not exactly what I'm into as much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Half the book is about that.
Mm-hmm.
I would change it around, but I'm just very happy that it exists, and it completely changed my career. It has made it so that my work is appreciated by people interested in magical new age things, separate from comic book fans. And it's made me so happy because my work is weird and I don't fit in the regular comic book world. I don't really even fit in the alternative comic book world. And so that's just been an enormous thing for me. I'm just really happy that it happened.
Yeah. Wow. There's so much I want to respond to. So first of all, I want people to know as well, if they can get their hands on this book, they must,
Yeah.
Because to your point, I think it's a really great, what would you call it? A buffet, a banquet of lots of different esoteric texts and ideas that you then kind of illustrate these concepts through the medium of these psychedelic comics. So you touch on everything from consciousness and magic, and you get into theosophy and spiritualism and alchemy, all of these different amazing corpuses of work.
Yeah. And specific people.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, talk about Tesla and Mesmer and Sun Ra and all of these and kind of tie, because it was just all overwhelming and tying them all together. In a lot of ways, people probably do tie these people together now, but 10 years ago wasn't so much.
Totally.
And also, if you do want to get the book, I'm pretty sure you can get it digitally.
Okay, right on.
Yeah.
And I promise we'll talk about your other work shortly, but my understanding too is that you were going to a series of lectures where you were learning about a lot of these different concepts, and I'd love to hear you just kind of expand upon that and what drew you to that lecture series in the first place. You alluded to a spiritual awakening, so I'm curious about that. Very nosy.
Yeah, it was my friend Maja.
I know Maja.
Yes, and I don't know if she's been a guest in your show or not.
Not yet. She's on the list.
Okay. She started giving lectures around 2010, 2008. I had already known her through the comic scene. She had done zines about alchemy. I was like, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
Even talking about? No idea what it was. I decided I wanted to go see what her lectures were like. And she was doing it at the Philosophical Research Society,
The best.
where she was working at the time. And it was called Magic Class. Maja has this demeanor that she's like a rock and roll kind of person, but can talk. She's got this. She's got all of the knowledge of everything right there at her fingertips. The way a scientist or a doctor would have like so many facts, and she can just lecture about any sort of esoteric topic.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about 5 years she was doing that in Los Angeles. It was a really big community of people that were going every month, and it was growing while she was doing that. And so about half the book is her lectures turned into comics.
So cool.
A lot of times I would then go and she would mention Tesla, and I would read a book about Tesla and be like, oh, I'm going to do 5 pages about him.
Yeah.
And so it kind of branched off from that. And that was really where I found all the stuff that I was interested in, because I'm particularly interested in kind of the past and esoteric stuff and all the old crusty alchemy, magic stuff.
Yes.
I like to go further back with things. And I didn't really know where to begin, and kind of was introduced to all of it.
So can I ask, and I'll just prod a little bit more and then tell me if I'm prodding too much. You did mention a spiritual awakening. Did this happen because of this material you were suddenly exposed to, or did your awakening lead you to this material?
It's really hard to say. Probably both at the same time. It was mostly the material. My awakening was more about understanding stuff I always knew, as opposed to kind of like having new things happen to me. It was like a place where I finally found things like deja vu or reincarnation, or just like spiritual experiences that I had had in my life that I didn't know how to explain. It was more like finding all of this information helped me understand things that I was already experiencing.
Okay. And just to give a little bit more context for your work, you were, and perhaps still are, the drummer for an incredible band, Lavender Diamond.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, were you playing in the band already at this point too? Is that something that you've been doing in parallel?
Yeah. And to be honest, the band was kind of part of all of it too. We kind of had that put it on our sleeves, sort of like positive thinking, new age sort of band, which was a little weird in 2004.
Yeah, I feel like Becky Stark, the singer, is kind of like the Karen Carpenter of the occult. Like, she has such a sweet voice, and the lyrics, and I mean, I'm not sure who writes the music, but it is so positive and sweet, but it's really grounded in some heavy consciousness expanding material too.
Her family is involved with a church called Unity. I don't even know. It's a Christian metaphysical church.
No,
that
I
is
don't know that.
very theosophy on the family tree of theosophy. So it was kind of like Maja's lectures, meeting Becky and her mom, and kind of all of it at once in Los Angeles was something that was like happening to me.
Wow. And so you were drumming and cartooning at the same time. And have you been a musician and an artist in parallel your whole life, or did one precede the other?
Yeah, I guess so. I started doing work in the very early 90s. I self-published my own work by photocopying it, starting in 1990. And so I was around all through the sort of alternative underground culture of the 90s, where nobody really put a word on a band or a book or what you did or the name of your record. It was very different than it was portrayed as in later decades. But yes, I was part of sort of a music and underground art scene in Boston, and had been doing zines and doing weird music stuff, but the music thing was always kind of on the side.
Okay.
Lavender Diamond making records and touring was kind of an anomaly. I didn't really ever expect that to happen. I was kind of just goofing around. Whereas the art and making comics was always in the forefront.
So cool.
I self-published through the 1990s, and I started putting out graphic novels throughout the 2000s.
Amazing.
And so by the time I did the cartoon Utopia in 2012, I had already been putting out comics for close to 20 years by then.
And those comics were more personal, or more like, how would you classify those as opposed to the more esoteric or magical comics?
Well, it's funny because they all had magical realism in them. They all had this weird, like, philosophical yearning. The characters were always kind of like confused or looking for something or searching. It was all kind of already in there. My first big book was called Skibberby Bye. It's fictional. It has 3 main characters, if you look at it, it's like this Jungian analysis of myself that I didn't know I was doing.
Interesting.
Is kind of like what the book looks like now. So,
And do you find yourself circling back to some of those other characters or older characters? Are you integrating all of these different parts of like the Ron Regé Jr. universe or metaverse?
kind of, I just put out a book 2 years ago called Halcyon
Mm-hmm.
from Fantagraphics, which is a fictional book, but it was completely delivered to me. It was forced into my head and I had to transcribe it. I do a lot of transcribing of things that just appear to me and act as a vehicle for the work. But that book is basically the same thing as Skibberby Bye done over again 20 years later. It's basically the same book, but it's just done in a different way that I'm in a different part of my life. And yes, integrates a bunch of stuff. At the very end of it, I have a piece from the Nag Hammadi, this Sophian Gnostic piece that I just put there at the end, and you read it, and you're like, what does this have to do with this whole book I just read?
Yes.
So it kind of brings into it, the book has a sort of spirit character in it, this sort of otherworldly kind of like creature that kind of comes into people's lives. So.
I love Halcyon. It is so stunning. Totally gorgeous. Totally gorgeous. Ron, on that note, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. This episode of The Witch Wave is brought to you by Wiser Books. I'm so excited to tell you about the Shining Tribe Tarot, the definitive edition by Rachel Pollack. Now, many of you already know of Rachel's work, and I was so honored to have her as a guest on the podcast before she passed away last year. Rachel was a tarot legend and the renowned author of 78 Degrees of Wisdom, her tarot book, which has never gone out of print and is considered the Bible of tarot. And Rachel wrote many other incredible tarot books, as well as speculative fiction and comic books, and she was also a transgender trailblazer. Just an absolute icon and a true genius in all respects. The Shining Tribe Tarot is Rachel's deck that she designed and wrote the guidebook for. And so this new edition of it is such an exquisite way to honor her memory and extend her legacy, and to share more of her magic with the world. The Shining Tribe Tarot invites readers to join the shining tribe of diviners and visionaries and take a timeless, sacred journey of self-discovery. The cards are steeped in symbolism drawn from culturally diverse systems that Rachel spent a lifetime studying, including Neolithic rock art, Native American and African shamanism, Aboriginal art, the Kabbalah, Jungian psychology, and of course, the traditional tarot. And it is also very inclusive of different genders and sexualities, which was so important to Rachel as it is for so many today. The accompanying book includes detailed descriptions of the origin and history of the symbols depicted on each card of this unique deck, as well as explanations of their meanings in divinatory spreads. The minor arcana is focused in nature, with the suits represented by stones, rivers, trees, and birds. Using Rachel's beautifully written guidebook, you will learn how to read the cards for a variety of purposes, including divination, advice, and guidance along your own personal sacred journey. Lessons from Rachel are also shared to help you gain insights into the nightly messages from your subconscious mind through dream readings, as well as how to activate a card to bring its qualities into your everyday life. The Shining Tribe Tarot was groundbreaking when it was first published, but this new Wiser Books edition includes color corrections to the card art as directed by Rachel, as well as 5 new cards not available in the previous edition, including 1 addition to the major arcana and an extra card in each of the minor arcana suits. The accompanying book has also been revised and expanded, and for the first time is printed in full color. As you continue along your own sacred journey of self-discovery, let the Shining Tribe Tarot cards shine a path for you. The Witch Wave is sponsored by BetterHelp. How is your social battery right now? Are you feeling drained, or are you exploding with energy, or somewhere in the middle? I think about my social battery all the time because I am actually an introvert who performs as an extrovert. In other words, I love speaking with people and presenting and meeting people and being out in the world, but I actually need a lot of alone time and downtime to recharge. Being social definitely brings me a lot of joy, but it also drains my social battery. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized that I was actually an introvert and that I needed to prioritize making time to be alone, to read a book, to be quiet, to just replenish. It can be so easy to ignore our social battery and spread ourselves thin, especially with there being more social gatherings and events picking up after the winter. Everyone's kind of coming out of hibernation. But what is the right amount of socializing for you? And how do you recharge? Maybe you thrive around people, or maybe you really need some more alone time. Therapy can give you the self-awareness to build a social life that doesn't drain your battery. And therapy has helped me figure this out myself so that I'm sure that if I have a lot of social plans on the calendar, I also now know to book a lot of off days or off hours so I can then recharge. And that's why I love therapy so much, because it's not only for times of extreme emotion or crisis, it also helps develop ways so you can support yourself in the day-to-day. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find your social sweet spot with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/witchwave today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/witchwave. Welcome back to the Witch Wave. Today I'm speaking with Ron Regé Jr. So Ron, you said something earlier and my ears just perked way the fuck up, which is that this book, Halcyon, was delivered to you.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I am actually in the throes of writing my next book, and it's all about the relationship between creativity and magic. And a big piece of it is about channeling or keeping that channel open, you know, how we receive ideas. And so I would love for you to elaborate on how Halcyon came to you, if you don't mind.
I would love to, because it kind of calls into why my work is a little bit weird and not everyone gets it. Comics don't always make sense because I don't care about how fiction is supposed to be written. I'm not doing it to appeal to anyone. I like movies that don't make any sense. I don't want to know the character's name or their background. I'm not interested in those things in life, but all of the things I've realized as my life has gone on is that I don't mess with what comes through. So I get an idea for a story, or I get an idea for a comic or anything, and I just let it right through and I don't change it. And I hear friends of mine and people I know who do craft stories talking about their ideas, and they're like, well, I was thinking on the third chapter that maybe the character should do this over the. I don't do that. It just comes straight through. And I don't know why I do it, but I just feel, for me personally, it feels spiritual. I'm being given something from another realm, which is my creativity. For me, making my comics is my spirituality, which is why I don't get really into astrology or tarot or any known forms, because this thing that I'm doing is my spiritual outlet. So I don't feel like I'm allowed to touch it. And Halcyon, I was not planning on doing it. I was going to be working on other things, and it would not leave me alone. Each little part of the story has different characters and different chapters. And there's this green character that's in the sort of alien angel that I was talking about. And that's me in another realm. And that's the author of the story that appeared to me. And was like, you have to do what it's like this. And then I just did it because I've been doing comics long enough. And I have this hand that knows what my comics look like after 30 years, where I just sit down and it comes out. I can draw like Ron Regé already. So I just sat there and did it. And I was in the middle of doing it and the pandemic happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I think I won't leave my house for the next like 15 months.
Yep.
And I'm like, no one's going to think that's weird because that's what everyone's doing. And I just did it.
So it was your own cartoon monastery.
Yeah, but that's kind of like everything that I do, just kind of, I've heard David Lynch talk about like his way of like catching the little fish and he's looking for the big fish.
Yes.
I think that I just take the little fish and that's good enough. And I just listen to like what it has to say. I'm not going hunting for the big idea. I'm not interested in competition. I want to be the best at anything. I think humans have a problem with trying to be so great all the time and trying to be the best thing or trying to like make something. They should just do what they're going to do. I feel more humble about my work. I don't want everyone to look at it. I'd like to survive, and that's about it. And so that's the way that I've kind of seen it. And that's my spiritual way of just, I take the idea and just put it right out there. And a lot of times it doesn't make any sense, but maybe if we taught you get something in the mail every month where I do that.
Yes, I do.
Sometimes under duress, because I don't know what the hell I'm going to do and I have to do it every month.
Yes, which is also a kind of spiritual practice, I would say, or at least some kind of a mindfulness practice.
Right.
And Ron, we should elaborate. You do have this subscription service. I have been a subscriber for many, many years now, where you do send us stuff in the mail every month. There are sometimes zines or more large format photocopied comics and stuff. It is such a delight and a joy. But to your point, it sounds like you're not precious about what the ideas are. You're not judging them.
Right.
You're just like, all right, this showed up, so I'm going to materialize it with the creative magic that I, Ron Regé, have, which is my artistry, right?
And that seems to make the most sense to me and feels right to me. Not everyone is the same. That just feels right to me. I mean, when I've tried to change it, it doesn't feel as right to me. And it's all kind of like trying to get it as clear as possible or something.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all have egos, but it sounds like an egoless or an attempt at an egoless practice. You're not trying to impress anybody.
Right.
You're not trying to get some level of whatever fame or notoriety. You're literally like, I'm the vessel or the messenger for this stuff that's coming through, and that is my job. So that is why I'm here. Is that right?
It's self-indulgent, which is the ego part of it.
Right. Right.
That a lot of times I feel like, well, why do I have the ability or do I get to be in this place to be so, honest or self-indulgent with is a privilege unto itself. And I do realize that.
Sure. I want to circle back to David Lynch because I actually wrote his name down probably 5 minutes before you brought it into the conversation. Because when you talk about like the movies that you like being more, I don't know, nonlinear or non-logical, irrational, whatever words we want to use, like he to me is one of the prime auteurs of that kind of work. And I'm also a huge fan of the book that you're referencing, Catching the Big Fish. I'm sure I've mentioned it on this podcast before. It's his kind of take on creativity and meditation, very based in his transcendental meditation practice. But even if you're not into TM, I think it's still such a valuable book for any human being to read, but especially any creative person to read, for sure.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And it was interesting to even hear him describe things his way and be like, okay, I kind of get it. My way's a little bit different than that.
Can you talk about that, though? Because I don't actually see a big difference between what he describes and what you describe. I feel like he's talking about catching the big fish, but I think he also allows for like the little fish, too.
Yeah. As a broad concept.
Yeah.
There was something when he was describing his broadest concept about finding the bigger idea and like waiting for it to come or something was where I was like, oh, I just saw a difference in how I would approach that. Is all. More in just a broad sense, not in the specifics.
Yeah. Do you meditate, Ron? Is that a difference too? Or I guess cartooning is meditation in a way.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of meditative practices in my life, but not specifically, no.
I'm curious now. I was going to ask this later, but I'm just going to go with my intuition here. Who are some of the other filmmakers or cartoonists, whomever, who you see as like North Stars? Murakami kind of jumped into my mind for you. I don't know if you're a Murakami fan, just in terms of, I feel like that storytelling is sort of non-linear or non-traditional, or at least non-Western,
What is the Gene Dealman movie? Is that Chantal Ackerman? I love that film. I like Wim Wenders movies. The Enigma of Caspar Hauser.
Ooh, I don't know that one.
The German man that everyone knows.
Werner Herzog.
Werner Herzog. I like Herzog films from the 70s.
That makes sense.
That sort of stuff, I guess, in cinema, in comics. I like a lot of comics that don't have anything to do with what I do. I'm just, I'm a comics nerd.
Sure.
I like very old things. I like Gasoline Alley, Gary Painter. I've been a fan of Love and Rockets since I was 15.
Oh, yeah.
And it's always been there. So that sort of stuff. I do take a lot of inspiration from outsider art, raw artists, people like Zukalski or Joe Coleman or, anyone who would be in Raw Vision magazine, whether they're new or old.
Yes.
I've been interested in outsider art since I knew it existed in like the 80s or early 90s. So there's a lot of that visionary art. Anyone now who has a spiritual aspect to what they've done throughout history.
Yeah.
And also things like, illuminated manuscripts. And I'm very attached to the fact that less than 100 years ago, making and drawing things was super important. You needed people to draw the pictures for the newspaper. The working class craft of artistry is interesting to me too. And mixing it all together. Yeah.
Yeah. The high and the low, which is what I'm always really excited by in a lot of the artwork that I'm interested in. I wanted to name William Blake because I feel like you're in lineage with him.
Yes.
And I know that sounds lofty, but I truly believe it. Like, I think you're kind of dipping from the same well.
The more I learn about him, the more I feel akin to him. I think of him as the first zine maker.
Tell me more.
He made those things in his house. And, there's like 20 copies of each one of them. And he made them in his house by himself and using, like techniques from the 1700s or whatever, but like he made his own books and there's not that many of them and he hand colored them himself. And his little booklets are his artwork. All the other stuff he did was like for other people that hired him so he could survive to make his little things. And the fact that he was making this like weird Swedenborgian sex magic art is just like, very similar.
Right. And like interrogating these ethereal realms and world building through text and illustration, which is precisely what you do. There's someone else I want to bring into our conversation, and this is kind of coming from left field. It's just coming from my childhood. And this cartoonist work is not topically the same as yours, but I think vibrationally it is, which is, are you familiar with Mark Allen Stamety?
I was hoping you were going to say that.
What? Get out of here.
He's the greatest. I'm not sure I was specifically aware of him until I was an adult.
Yeah.
But he was there when I was a kid. He was in the background. I know I saw his books as a child, but books like his are exactly why I wanted to draw comics,
Yes.
As an adult and seeing some of them republished, they're out of control. Yeah, I wish. It's like when I finally get to the point where I can do what he does, then I'll stop. But I'm not sure I'm gonna...
but you're so exquisite in your own way. It's like a different vibe, but still that dense line work. And I don't know, I just get that same excitement and exuberance that comes off the page when I look at both of your work. And I will dork out and I'll just say, this is like such a roundabout name drop. But my grandmother was friends with his mother. And so I never met him, but like his books were just part of my childhood.
They don't have any black in them. There's no grayscale. That's the similarity, is he doesn't have any place to rest your eye.
Interesting. That's so true. I'll just say also, like, I wrote him a fan letter recently because there's this band I love called the Pink Clouds, and he did the cover of their album a couple years back. And I was like, I can't believe Mark Allen Stamety just illustrated the cover of a Pink Clouds album. And so I wrote him a little fan note, and he was so delightful and lovely. And he's still around as far as I know. I see you guys as kind of kindred in that way.
I would think that he lives in New York, but I don't know. He just seems like such a New York artist to me, but...
Yes, he did a lot of Village Voice covers and stuff like that too. So cool. And the other kind of comics piece that I want to bring into our conversation is one of my very favorite kind of sacred texts, which is Alan Moore and J.H. William III's Promethea. Have you read Promethea?
I have not read the whole thing.
So good, Ron. You got to do it. You got to do it.
I do. It's so funny that I love Alan Moore and I love to hear him talk and I love everything about him. but I've just never liked the artwork of mainstream comic books and have based like my identity on the fact that like starting in the 80s, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I don't like the way they look. I can't even read them. I don't understand the way the panel mainstream comics are like.
So even Sandman comics wasn't for you?
No, I never read any of that stuff. I was already reading Love and Rockets.
Yeah, I get it.
I had a point as like a weird little teenager that was discovering like sad goth things in the 80s where I was like, the X-Men I'm not interested in this. I'm not a kid anymore. I don't like it. And I don't even like the way it's drawn. I don't think I like comic books. And I'm interested in The Cure. I mean, I was just changing.
Yeah.
And I turned my head and I saw Love and Rockets and like neat stuff. Like I saw these Fantagraphics comics and then discovered Undergrounds, but then I stopped. So over the years, I know that Prometheus is great. I know that I'd probably like Sandman, but I just have never put in the effort and it's like hard for me to do, which is just hilarious.
And it's totally fine. Like Ron, to each their own and like follow your bliss and all that. So you do not have to read them. But for listeners, Promethea it's like a magical treatise on creativity and magic and art and, you know, kind of pretending to be a superhero story, but it's not really. And of course, Sandman, no one needs me to like tell them to go read Sandman because you just should. And if you don't, that's okay. But you should.
Sandman, aren't they finally doing it?
They've turned into a Netflix show. Like it's a whole thing now, which actually was quite a good show. But anyway, let's get back to you. But first, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. You've heard me wax ecstatic about Snowy Owl Tea before, and so you will understand why I am so excited to announce that I have teamed up with them to create an exclusive Witchwave herbal tea blend just for you. Witchwave tea combines some of my favorite botanicals, including nettles, rosehip, lavender, elderflower, and vanilla. And there's also some butterfly pea flower in there, which means that if you squeeze some lemon into your tea after it's brewed, the color will change, just like magic. And of course, it comes in Snowy Owl's signature shiny holographic packaging with a brand new Black Cat and Purple Moon label, all of which makes me swoon. This Witchwave tea blend from me and Snowy Owl is now available in the Witchwave shop while supplies last. So head on over to witchwavepodcast.com/shop to order yours now. It's currently the only place where you can buy this tea blend. But don't forget to also check out Snowy Owl Tea's other delicious tea blends over on their website, snowyowltea.com, and you'll see why I fell in love with their handcrafted, scrumptious, full-leaf tea and blossom blends in the first place. Some of my favorites of theirs include Second Breakfast, which is a blend of lemon, poppy seed, and oat, and 11th Hour Black Tea, which has vanilla and cardamom. And best of all, Snowy Owl is offering 10% off any teas ordered from their site using code POTION. So head over to snowyowltea.com and use code POTION for 10% off their house blends. And if you want our new, exclusive, delicious, color-changing Witchwave herbal tea blend, you can order that now over at witchwavepodcast.com/shop. This season of The Witchwave is brought to you in part by Sphere and Sundry, an astro-magical atelier where you can get expertly elected materia magica, oils, incense, bath salts, salves, inks, beauty oils, and more, which have been ritually crafted during rare, powerful, and benefic astrological configurations. And oh my word, I can tell you firsthand, this is the stuff. These formulas are chosen in accord with the strict requirements of the talismanic tradition outlined in the Picatrix and other ancient grimoires, meaning you can benefit from the power of amazing astrological transits even when the stars haven't aligned. These are incredible tools for witches who are looking to embrace the manifestations and results of their spell work, especially the Luna in Cancer series. And I myself have the Luna in Cancer incense, and it is a dream to use for any kind of lunar magic. Venus materia can be used for love, glamour, and attraction. Regulus for fame and recognition, Asclepius for healing and transformation, and Deneb al-Gedi for protection. I also used several of Sphere and Sundry's magical products on site in Greece during our group rituals, and they were so potent and so exquisite. I can't say enough good things about them. Since 2018, Sphere and Sundry have been a key driver in the rising tide of popularity and interest in astrological magic, amassing over 5,000 five-star reviews and field reports on their website. Most orders ship within 1 business day, and Sphere and Sundry is also well known for their incredible customer service as they are their magical results, and I can attest to that as well. Learn more and get $10 off your first order at sphereandsundry.com using the code WitchWave. That's sphereandsundry.com, sphereandsundry.com, and use code WitchWave for $10 off your first order. This episode of the Witchwave is brought to you by Mithras Candle. Witches know candles are more than just mood lighting or decor. They are powerful tools of wisdom and magic. Candles held sacred significance for our ancestors, embodying hope, renewal, and comfort during the darkest hours. Candle makers, or chandlers, were often spiritual folk, priestesses, monks, druids, and witches, those who knew the significance of these ancient lights. In these modern times, my pagan friends at Mithras Candle uphold this candle-making tradition with reverence. Made by hand, each Mithras candle is a testament to purity and craftsmanship using the most sacred of materials, beeswax. Picture the gentle flicker of beeswax candles carrying the natural aroma of honey and floral notes. And while their Byzantine hand-dripped pillars steal the show, Mithras offers a variety of shapes and colors, including seasonal delights like the soon-to-be-announced green candles for May. Ready to illuminate your space with arcane luxury? Visit mithrascandle.com today and use offer code WITCH24 to enlighten your world with 24% off your first order. That's M as in magic, ITHRAS, candle.com, and use WITCH24 for 24% off your first order. Welcome back to the Witch Wave. Today I'm speaking with Ron Regé Jr. So Ron, you brought up a esoteric text that I actually was not familiar with until I encountered it in your work, and you mentioned it already. This is from the Nag Hammadi Library,
Yes.
Codex 13, in this latest book, which I should have mentioned already. It's called Shell Collection. It comes out the day after this podcast is going to drop. Perfect.
Yes.
And in the Shell Collection, you do this really beautiful sort of, what would you call it, a rendition of this text? But anyway, can you tell people what this text is? Because it was totally new to me, and it is gorgeous.
The Nag Hammadi is, and it's something that I had kind of heard about. Lane Pagels is the author that is the easiest to access about this material. But the Nag Hammadi is all the stuff that got cut out of the Bible. That's the easiest way to say it. It was rumored for thousands of years, because the church was created by Rome as a patriarchal church, that they chose what would become Christianity. But of course, things that you would consider being Christian existed as Jewish cults for hundreds and hundreds of years, slowly coalesced into something.
Yeah.
But there were many, many, many other writings. And they were so systematically destroyed that they had only been referred to over the millennia as having perhaps existed. Even in them having perhaps existed, there's all this Gnostic stuff and alchemy that like kind of comes out of this stuff. But in 1947 in Egypt, they found a jar that had the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and I'm forgetting like 10 or 15 of them, as well as many other ancient texts. That's where my interest lies. I was raised Catholic. A lot of my spiritual things that I experienced happened because of like grand churches and ley lines of where cathedrals are. And I looked for something of value in a religion that there's nothing to defend or to value at all. For like 2,000 years, it's a terrible thing, the Catholic Church. But Christianity used to have a god and a goddess. There were two of them. And when you look at it before cutting half of it off, it's this really beautiful, spiritual, like Jewish hippie religion about being nice to everyone. It's super fascinating to me. The Nag Hammadi keeps getting edited and it keeps being brought up to date. And I just like a lot of the scriptures in it are really beautiful. The one that you're talking about that I did a whole art show about it is Sophian. It's about Sophia. And that concept is something that's super interesting. She fits into everything, being the word of the thought.
Yes. I know some people consider Sophia like the feminine face of God, or she's sometimes called like the goddess of wisdom.
Yes. Or just the Holy Spirit in the Trinity that the church doesn't like to talk about. It's so weird how there's like little pieces left behind. But yeah, the Nag Hammadi is super interesting and very current because it's just, I like this author, G.R.S. Mead, who is the Theosophical writer. He wrote all about all of this Gnostic stuff and he had never even seen the Nag Hammadi. He only wrote about the people who wrote about having seen parts of it.
It reminds me, so I was raised Jewish and I consider myself still Jewish. I'm pagan as well. I sometimes call myself Jewitch just for like shorthand. But I remember when I was older learning about this feminine side of God called Shekinah, which is, you know, the bride of God. It's this whole like feminine version of the Godhead, if you will, that was just never taught to me as a kid. And so, yeah, it seems like a lot of what the project of modern magic is or modern esotericism is. Not for everybody, but for a lot of us, it's about like excavating the feminine and the non-binary and trying to equalize or harmonize those forces with the masculine, which has been so dominant for so long.
There's one little topic, because we're talking about this, that if I was ever on your show, I wanted to mention.
Well, you're on my show right now, Ron.
Both to you and to your listeners, which is the esoteric topic of Wonder Woman.
Fuck yes. I know that you did this incredible mini comic, Diana, right?
Yes.
But keep going. Tell the good people about this.
Me and Maja did lectures together about this topic. Do you know anything about the people who created Wonder Woman? Because I know that you're interested in science fiction and these kinds of stuff and the witch side. So you probably know a little bit about...
I know about the S&M twist to it, but pretend I don't. Please tell my listeners.
Wonder Woman was created by a man named William Moulton Marston. I'd say very quickly, he was an early psychologist and he wanted to make a comic book with a woman character. He had two children with his wife, who was an academic. She worked at like Encyclopedia Britannica or something like that. They were intellectual New Yorkers. They met at Harvard. He also had two children with a younger woman who lived with them. They had a plural relationship, and they are the people who created Wonder Woman together. All three of them created. Everyone knows about this. His younger woman was the niece of Margaret Sanger. Feminism, all discovered by Jill Lepore, who is a historian at Harvard, who wrote this amazing book about it. But if you read the early Wonder Woman comics, you will instantly notice that she is covered in esoteric symbols and everything about her. She is like an Annie Besant turned into a superhero. Everything she does in the early comics are just things about astral projection. And everything that everyone talks about with magic stuff is all right in there. It's perfectly obvious. It's right out there for everything to see. There was another woman who lived with their family, a third woman, who I'm guessing was queer, who lived in the attic, and the children described her as burning incense and reading tarot cards. She ran the Wonder Woman offices in New York City, they were all academics. They all lived together. It's very obvious that there is something spiritual. It could be theosophy. It could be they were into the I am thing. They could be into something weird. People want to make it salacious. I don't think they were into S&M at all. I think that is a huge ruse. I think they were into something magical. It was left behind. Someone else needs to look into it. I always figure someone else would. If you just go and read those early comics 10 years ago, it didn't seem as obvious. It's like the 5 volumes that you can get.
Ooh, I'm going to have to track those down.
But she's a feminist. She gets hit on the head with a blackjack. What does she do? She goes into a yogic trance and like slows down all of her body things. When she goes to the astral plane, people appear as their idealized selves. There's just all of this stuff in there.
That's awesome.
I got really obsessed with it. Too obsessed, and I discovered I'm not good at writing. I'm not a journalist. I can't write essays. I can't do scholarly research. I just got really excited about it. I've just always figured someone else could do something. And I figured kind of the audience of your show is the people who might need to know about it.
Yes. Oh, you are speaking to the right people.
And a lot of it hasn't been looked at because it's wrapped up in sort of East Coast academia. You don't like to mention the spiritual. It detracts from people's reputations, especially in the past, that sort of thing.
Sure. The stigma of it.
In a more academic sense. But there's something there. Specifically, there's things in the DC archive, transcriptions of meetings that they attended that people could go and find and look at.
Okay, I'm going to chase this up because this is fascinating to me.
The archives have been moved from New York to Los Angeles because they were acquired. Whatever happened, I believe everything from DC moved across the country. There's something there for people to look at. I don't know what it is. I have a feeling it's probably something really basic, like they were into theosophy or something like that.
Yeah.
But they created her as she is a high functioning goddess and she's right there in front of all of us. It's why everyone likes her so much. It's not because of all of those other awesome reasons and this other reason.
Well, it seems like she is archetypally tapping into this like divine feminine energy. I mean, one of the things I appreciate about the new Wonder Woman films, and I liked the first one a lot, the second one was a little bumpy, but I really like how they lean into, and clearly the comic books have been doing this for a while now too, like the Greek goddess origin story of like Diana and some of the other goddesses and stuff. And it's like she's not quite Artemis, but she's sort of related, and she's not quite Astarte, but she's kind of related. Like they definitely are pointing towards that. Interesting. One of my earliest Witch Wave interviews is with the comic artist Nicola Scott, who has done a lot of Wonder Woman illustrations. And she went on to start her own story with Greg Rucka called Black Magic, which is a really incredible witchy story. I know for a fact that at least one current Wonder Woman illustrator is like very into witchy shit. So, yeah, there's a lot of threads to weave together. And I totally hear you that there's a lot more to like Diana's origin story as an archetypal figure than people realize on purpose too. Yeah. Intentional.
It was intentional. And what they intended, I think there's more to discover about it.
Gorgeous. Gorgeous.
Even the simple fact that in the comic book, Diana was created parthenogenically by her mother. And no one will put that in a movie. They will not put that in a comic book. They cut that out of the comic book in 1947 as soon as he died. And they created another origin story for her.
Yeah, exactly.
There's stuff there in the original.
Definitely. Definitely. Ron, I want to ask you, what are you enchanted by now? What are you drawing? What are you thinking about? What weird esoteric texts are you excavating? What's going on in the present for you?
God, I don't even know. I've been working on my own stuff so hard. I just saw this movie, the Saragosso manuscript. It's from the 60s. That was really interesting. It's got a bunch of alchemical stuff. It's like a tarot deck turned into a movie. It's the easiest way to explain it. I feel like I could watch it over and over again. And it also has a weird history. The last print of it almost got thrown in the trash, but then Jerry Garcia bought it.
Oh, amazing.
And then he passed away and Martin Scorsese made sure it was like all put back together. So there's like a new output of it.
Ooh.
I also love Ken Russell, The Devils.
See, that film I have such respect for, but it upsets me so much. I watched it once and I'm like, I'm glad I saw it, but never again.
Yeah, I know,
Oof,
right?
it is so disturbing.
That book is interesting because of the way that Ken Russell does everything, as in that he didn't fictionalize a single thing. You can just read it as a
Yep,
book. What they did to
exactly.
him, they wrote it all down.
Yes.
And you can read, it's like right on Wikipedia, the letter from the devil. You just
Oof.
type in the guy's name and it pops right up. And I'm like,
Yes.
wait, they didn't fictionalize anything.
Yep. It's wild. It's a wild, wild film. But what about in your own artwork?
Mhm.
What are you working on and focusing on, if you don't mind my asking? Or are you somebody who likes to keep that close to your chest while you're incubating?
Well, I am kind of just like, I've been doing this subscription
Mm-hmm.
and putting out this book and kind of like concentrating on the subscription thing now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping to start serializing another graphic novel with the subscription, but I need a little bit of time to get it together to organize it. But for issue 100 is coming up in May.
Congratulations.
And I'm going to do an anthology of other artists.
Ooh, that's cool.
So I've just asked friends of mine to give me comics for it. So that will be a kind of big, fun thing to put together.
I love that. How fabulous.
For people like you, all my subscribers, as this kind of like celebrating. And then I think I'm going to take a couple months off.
Good for you.
And
Good
still
for
send
you.
people things, but keep it kind of minimal.
Good.
Yeah, I have a couple of different book ideas that I'm thinking of doing. But also at the same time, a lot of my work has been just taking on more like ideas about anarchism or political ideas. And also just as an artist in general, it's a weird time to do stuff.
Oh, totally. Totally.
I feel like I make a very meager living from what I'm doing, and I'm at work doing my job a lot with art at the moment. I'm inspired, but it's also just so many different things that are going on in the world. Even just the things that have happened in the last few years, it's very hard to just kind of continue on with the things that we were doing before.
Yeah.
And I sense it and I see it in everything. And I see people coming out with their new album and their new books, in many ways going through the motions. I don't know if I'm proud to say that or whatever, but I can't pretend like everything is normal.
Yeah.
In many ways. And I think my work will probably start to reflect that more in stuff. And that's why I look into the past. I'm looking for other ways that societies are organized and how people live together before, because there's better ways to live.
Yes.
And this whole system that we have, it's not going to wind down slowly. It seems like it's going to collapse. And I'm just preparing myself for it in many different ways. And so I think that my work will probably reflect that. But at the same time, I'm still continuing on doing my little mailing about making little artworks.
You are the messenger.
Mm-hmm.
Your job is to show up and make whatever's coming through. And if that's what's coming through, that's important for you to honor. I wanted to ask about the name of the series. I know the book is called Shell Collection, but how did you come up with the full name?
Yes, it's called The Shell of the Self of the Senses, which is like a tongue twister. It's just the first comic I drew. I started a Patreon. I knew I was going to do a subscription, and that was the first comic. It should have just been the name of that individual comic instead of the series. I guess I just went with it because I'm a little bratty. I like words that are hard to say or like whatever, but it does kind of explain kind of like what my work is about. I'm talking about you have like your skin around you. That's your senses. And then there's obviously, is there something else to you? Are we these bodies? Are we even souls? Is it shaped like a human being? What is a human? What are we experiencing here? So the name makes sense to me for the series. The first comic I did was about the idea of the bicameral mind in the past, like that sort of thing. And I very much feel that way. The older I get, I feel like I'm always like, there's two me at the same time that are always having a conversation. I feel like when I'm like doing the dishes or something, there's someone else being like, what are you doing? That's not the way to do it. We work with each other these days. They're like, come on, you can go and do this podcast.
But so much of your work deals with exactly that. It deals with these polarities that you're then reconciling and metabolizing and frankly, beautifying with your artwork. And I think that is such a powerful offering and such a gorgeous magic spell that you're consistently weaving and have been for years and years. And I remain an ardent fan of yours. I am so excited that you're going to reach your 100th issue. Everybody needs to go subscribe. How can people also, like me, get some magic in the mail from you, Ron?
Well, I have a Patreon, Ron Regé, RONREGE. I mail things to people every month. And if not, I make up for it. I think I'm been pretty consistent.
I can attest to that.
Yeah, it's patronage. The thing that you get, you guys only get, but a lot of the material gets reused and so forth. Yeah, I think Instagram is really just the best way to find out everything that I'm doing. The book comes out through Fantagraphics next week and should be available wherever they have graphic novels.
Yep. And we're doing a time-space jump, so it'll actually come out tomorrow by the time this episode airs.
It comes out tomorrow. I just got back from Texas. I'm going to a show in Texas this week where it's going to debut called Staple in Austin.
Amazing.
I'm excited to go and do that.
Well, there is so much more that we have to discuss. I hope you'll come back again so we can continue the conversation. I just adore what you make, and I'm so grateful for it. And I'm so grateful to you for coming on the Witch Wave. Thank you so much, Ron. This was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, thank you very much.
That's it for the show. Thank you again to Ron Regé Jr. for sharing his cosmic comics with me. Do you have questions, feedback, need some witchly advice, or just want to share something magical that happened to you recently? Please do drop us an email or a voice memo at witchwavepodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, and you just might make it on the Witchwire. The Witch Wave is a Phantasmophile production written and produced by me, Pam Grossman. This episode was recorded and edited by Josh Wilcox and/or Walter Nordquist and myself. Our theme music is the song Hand and I by Lycanthia. Our new Witch Wave logo was designed by Thunderwing, and special thanks, as always, go to Matt Freeman, Laura Antal, and Cece Pascal. You can check out information about this and other episodes on our website and now buy Witch Wave merch over at witchwavepodcast.com. Please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, and do consider giving us lots and lots of sparkly stars and glowing reviews. It really, truly does make a difference and helps other people find the show. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at WitchWavePod, and you can check out my witch emoji for iPhone by going to witchemoji.com or downloading it in the App Store. My book, Waking the Witch, is available everywhere now, and the Witchcraft book I edited and co-authored for Taschen is as well, so thank you for checking those out too. And if you want more Witch Wave, or you would just like to support the show, please do join us over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/witchwave. Thank you so much for listening. Witches are the future. I'll catch you next time on the Witch Wave.